It sometimes seems to Zora that, with all the teaching and meetings and paperwork, and caring and cooking and cleaning, she is floundering at the midpoint of her life. Perhaps, at 55, she's beyond the midpoint now, but she'd always imagined that these years, her child grown and gone, herself not yet old, would be her most spacious and productive. She'd pictured herself spending long, blissful days in her studio. But, instead, it's the weekend, and she'd hoped to spend her day painting, but the 5 a.m. phone call put a stop to that. "There's been a break-in," her mother's neighbour informed her. "Criminals, hooligans, God knows what. The police don't want to know." A cool needle of alarm slid into Zora's belly. She and Franjo moved quickly, groping for clothes. Through the tram window, Zora sees that old sofas bristling with barbed wire have been dragged out to split certain streets in two. She's read about this, but has never been up early enough to see it before. She knows that men with black stockings pulled low over their heads do this every night to carve up the city into enclaves. These furtive nationalists could be anyone, a neighbour, a lover, a friend. It's futile in any case. Every morning the bemused inhabitants, whether Muslim, Croat or Serb, simply push the barriers aside and get on with their days. On the second floor of the Habsburg building where she grew up, the front door has been forced open. Techno music spills out. Zora follows her husband down the corridor. In the living room, smoke hangs in a haze. 2 tall men are leaning back on her mother's Viennese dining chairs. Empty bottles and clothes are strewn around the place.
"What are you doing here?"
Zora says.
"We'll call the police."
The men turn, faces hard and impassive. One leans over to cut the music, and the other takes his time to get up. Zora notices that one of her father's paintings has been knocked to the floor.
"Go on,"
she urges, pushing Franjo forward into the room. The other man stands up too, his chair falling to the parquet floor, and all 3 start yelling at once. Zora takes a breath to steady herself before edging around the gesticulating men. It's only then that she sees the third intruder. A tiny woman is sitting in the armchair by the green-tiled stove, poker in hand. Her feet can't reach the ground, but she's large-chested and imposing, black hair piled high on her head. "She's dead," she says. "I know it." Zora feels herself flush.
"Who's dead? What are you talking about?"
The woman waves her hand around. "Whoever owns this old place, of course."
"My mother owns this place. She's very much alive."
The woman snorts. "Where is she, then?"
"She's staying with us at the moment."
"Huh. Why should we believe you?" throws in one of the men. Zora twists round. She realizes that, despite the height difference, the woman is their mother. They have the same wide-set eyes and curling lips.
"For God's sake, you can't just move into a place because no one's living here,"
Franjo says, the colour high in his cheeks.
"Ah, but we can," one of the sons growls. "Haven't you been listening, old man? So many people are leaving town at the moment that the government said all abandoned flats are public property. Up for grabs."
Zora gives Franjo a look of confusion. Things have been unsettled for months. Rumours of approaching violence circulate in the staff room and at the hairdressers, though the Bosnian president insists there will be no war.
"Look at the dust in this place," the woman says. "This is the flat of a dead woman."
"My mother's alive!"
Zora hears herself shout.
We'll only leave, the woman says, if you bring her here.
One of the sons starts laughing, and the others join in, their leering laughter chasing Zora and Franjo back along the corridor, down the dark stairs, and out onto the street. At the nearest police station, there's already a small crowd. Everyone is clamouring to say their piece about looted shops and robberies. Franjo glances around for somewhere to sit. Some 15 years older than Zora, he tires more quickly. When they're finally seen, the officer says,
"I'm afraid we can't throw them out. The new law is as they say. Empty flats are to be occupied by whoever needs them."
The only course of action, it seems, is to take her 83-year-old mother, who has not been outside for weeks because of a chest infection, back to her flat. She's spent every winter for the past 7 years with Franjo and Zora, leaving her cold, draughty apartment when the first snow falls and returning soon after Easter. They find her dozing in her armchair in the living room.
"Mama," Zora says, "we're taking you to your flat, just for half an hour or so, and then we'll come straight back again, I promise."
When they get to the flat, it's mid-afternoon. The sons are still rocking back on the dining chairs, and their mother is sitting in the same spot by the stove, a glass of whiskey in hand. Zora's mother enters the living room on Zora's arm. She stands still for a moment as her eyes adjust to the dimness. Then,
"Who are you?"
she says in a quavering voice.
"What are you doing in my flat?"
The sons look at each other and then at their mother. Jumping down from the armchair, she plants herself in front of Zora.
"All right," says the woman. "She's alive after all. Good for her. Well, we'll keep our word. We'll leave like we said we would."
She nods at her sons, and they set about grabbing their things and helping themselves to bottles of Slivovitz from the drinks cabinet. The minuscule woman grips Zora's arm.
"We might be going, my dear, but don't think that your mother's place is safe. Others will come."
Zora comes back early the next morning and sets to scrubbing and mopping. She works with anger, wondering how she will get the smell out of the place, stomach turning at the tumblers filled with discoloured cigarette butts and leftover whiskey. A web of long black hairs clings to the back of the armchair. By noon, the flat, aired and deep-cleaned, looks better than it has done in years. At 1 o'clock, a locksmith arrives to put in a new lock. She leaves a light and the radio on in the hall before triple-locking the door. Zora leans back against the scuffed wall of the ascending lift, the pleasure of returning home greater than usual. She remembers her and Franjo's delight when they found out they'd been awarded the place, a month after they married. Set in a grassy estate near the main hospital, the 8th-floor apartment with indoor toilet and central heating was a dream. It was flooded with light and free from the past. The curve of the mountains could be seen from every window. Zora finds her mama still in bed. Her face is clammy and pale, her breathing shallow.
"Mama, I've spent all morning cleaning. Every trace of that family has gone."
But her mother shudders and twists her head away. Franjo beckons Zora out.
"She woke up delirious right after you left. I called the doctor. He said it was a clear case of nervous shock and prescribed complete rest and quiet,"
Franjo says, shaking a cigarette from his pack.
"He said to take her out of Sarajevo, to the countryside, or a different country, if possible."
Zora raises her eyebrows. He exhales a thin stream of smoke.
"I've been thinking,
Why don't we bring forward our trip to England? Let's go now.
Instead of going this summer?
She imagines for a moment how wonderful that would be. Franjo, Zora and her mother go to Wiltshire for a month each summer to visit their daughter, Dubravka, married to an Englishman, and their 2-year-old granddaughter, Ruby. Stephen's a good man, an accountant and keen skier, who met Dee, as he calls her, during the Winter Olympics in 1984. They live in a quiet village near Salisbury. Zora adores the long visits. They make up for not having their only child and granddaughter close by the rest of the year.
I can't. I've got work, remember?
Surely you can take some time off.
And what about leaving both flats empty? We might as well invite people to move in and take everything.
Scratching his head, he looks down at the carpet for a long moment.
Dubravka thinks it's an excellent idea.
Zora closes her eyes and nods.
You go, she says heavily. Go for a fortnight, a month, 6 weeks. Go, until Mama's better.
I can't leave you here alone. Sarajevo's not safe at the moment.
Look, love, she says. Yesterday was a shock, but it was just a few drunken squatters. Nothing's going to happen to me in our flat. There's Mirsad and Radmila next door, and Anto and Milka opposite. We're on the 8th floor. No one's going to wander in off the street.
On the day of their departure, in the forecourt of the tower block, Franjo pulls Zora to him and holds her for a long moment before kissing her on both cheeks and then on the lips. The soft, dry touch of his lips on hers, almost tentative, takes her aback, and she steps away without meaning to. The next moment, he's in the cab, and the engine is running. He winds down the window.
See you soon, my love, he says. Paint as much as you can.
Zora experiences a tug of jealousy that they are going to see her daughter. Her mother leans over Franjo to look up at her.
Promise me you'll keep an eye on my flat, Zora, she says. Hide everything valuable.
As the cab draws away, Zora turns up her coat collar and breathes in deeply, a giddy sensation of freedom rising unexpectedly inside her. In her artistic prime at 55, Zora has agreed that her older husband, Franjo, and her frail mother should travel to England, where her daughter now lives, their annual holiday having been accelerated by the increasingly tense and lawless atmosphere in her beloved city of Sarajevo. It's the hour before sunset, and Zora's studio, on the top floor of the old town hall, or Viejnitsa, as everyone calls it, glows gold after a downpour. On her double easel, the shape of the Goat's Bridge is beginning to emerge. Worried as she is about the state of her city, her hours in the studio take on a feeling of holiday. She speaks to her family in Wiltshire each night, and feels a tug of yearning. Yet, each morning on waking up, she knows she would not exchange these weeks alone for anything. A few days into April, Zora turns on the TV after breakfast. Crowds of people are marching towards the Parliament building. Banners read, "Say no to nationalism. We want peace. Zora watches electrified. She sees herself gathering her things and going off to join the crowds. But her studio, her painting, are calling. Just after 3 o'clock, soft explosions sound, and the canvas jumps in its easel. She goes over to the window, but all seems as normal. Still, she moves quickly, cleaning and drying her brushes, panic expanding in her chest. On the news, she learns that the Peace March was fired on at around 2 o'clock by gunmen shooting from the top floor of the Holiday Inn, where the Serb Democratic Party has been camping out. 6 people have been killed, several more injured. The Bosnian Serb leader, Radovan Karadzic, has fled the hotel. Mortar bombs are being launched, seemingly under his orders, at the city centre, from the hills to the east. The following day, Zora has the urge to walk to the Goat's Bridge to clear her head. Beyond the last houses on the edge of the city, the paved embankment gives way to a stony track, which leads into the mouth of a gorge. She and her father would walk here often when she was little. The beautiful, single-arched Ottoman bridge was the first sign of the city of gardens and fountains, renowned as a refuge for all faiths. Rounding the bluff, the sight of several men erecting a barricade some 50 meters ahead draws her up short. Her mouth grows dry as she glances around for another way past, but there is none. As one of the men approaches, she sees, to her shock, that his cap has the skull and crossbones insignia of the Chetniks sewn on it. A memory of waiting and waiting for her daddy to return from the war comes rushing back. "No access," the soldier says. "He's no more than 16 or 17. "Why not?" she says. He draws himself taller. "This is now Republika Srpska. Only Serbs here." "I'm a Serb." He stares at her. One of the men erecting the barricade calls over, and the boy points his gun at Zora again. She tries to walk away with dignity. Sweat pricks under her arms, and her cheeks burn. She wonders what these boys are doing dressed up in their grandfather's uniforms. Zora's father, a partisan, never returned from the Second World War. He was killed, they said, by a Chetnik. A communist killed by a nationalist. A Serb killed by another Serb. His bloated body was found face down in a mountain stream 9 days after liberation, stripped of his gun, his wallet, his shoes. Every family has stories like this. The phone is ringing as the lift comes to a halt on the 8th floor. Entering her flat, she snatches it up.
"Thank God, Zora. Are you all right?" "I'm sorry, I'm fine, really I am."
"It's not good news, my love. I rang the airline. Sarajevo airport's been taken by the Yugoslav National Army. All flights have been cancelled."
"Are you saying you can't come? What about a coach? Or the train?"
"The official advice is not to travel." A long silence crackles down the line. "My love," he says, "the last thing I want is for you to be there alone. That's why we all want you to leave. Dubravka's very worried."
"But Franjo, they're telling us to stay put. That no one wants war."
"Some people do."
"What about our flat? And Mama's? Everything will be looted. It's anarchy here."
"That's exactly why we want you to leave."
"But Franjo, one of us needs to be here. We both need to be here."
She cannot believe her husband isn't coming home. His absence is like a dull ache in her bones. They agreed, in the end, that the airport might reopen soon, and then he'd be on the first plane he could, But if not, if things got worse, she'd look into ways of leaving. She loves Sarajevo. She knows all its alleys and courtyards, and she wants to stay. Schools close till further notice. It feels as if everyone's life is on hold while they wait for the madness to abate. Returning home one evening, exhausted, hungry, Zora goes into the mini-market on the ground floor of her apartment building. The price of fruit and vegetables has almost doubled in the last week, and she has to replace the bag of oranges she's chosen. Embarrassed, she leaves the shop quickly. Mirsad, her next-door neighbour, waiting in line behind her, catches up with her and presses 2 oranges into her hands. "Take them," he says. Then, with concern, he adds, "You okay, Zora?" Her eyes fill with tears. "Yes, yes," she says. The lift arrives, and they get in, standing side by side in the small space. Mirsad is a good-looking man, tall and broad-shouldered, with mild blue eyes, a bookshop owner and a close friend of Franjo's, even though he's much younger, somewhere in his mid-40s. The two spend hours chatting together about politics and literature in Mirsad's shop, sipping small cups of coffee. Zora allows her shoulder to rest against his for a reassuring moment. "It's not easy being alone right now," he says, as the lift comes to a halt on their floor. "Just knock on my door any time you need anything." Lenka, the downstairs neighbour's daughter, comes up to Zora's flat the next day. It's her father's birthday, and her mother, elated by a phone call from her son after an excruciating week of silence, and fed up with eating next to nothing, has cooked up a feast. "Will you come and join us? Mum's told me to invite next door, too." Zora finds herself sitting between Mirsad and Lenka at the table. Lenka's mother, Vesna, brings out dish after dish. A tray of grilled chicken wings, potatoes fragrant with rosemary, onions stuffed with spiced mincemeat. "Eat, eat," Lenka's father, Drago, says. "The fact is, we've all been abandoned." Vesna holds a stern finger in the air. "My baby Dushan's in Toronto." She jabs her finger towards Zora. "Your Franjo's in England? And Mirsad, your Radmila and Samir are... where are they again?" "Budapest," Mirsad supplies, a little stiffly. Zora looks at him in surprise. She'd assumed Radmila and Samir couldn't make the meal at such short notice. She hadn't realized he was spouseless and stranded, as she is. Vesna takes another gulp of wine. "The very simple question is it better to stay or go? Mirsad, what do you think?" Mirsad seems to be weighing up an answer when Drago steps in and says, "Well, I can tell you this. There's no way we're going to go and live in our weekend house, if that's what you want, Vesna. The place is overrun with Chetniks. So, at least they're Serbs like us. We'd feel safe," Vesna says. "Woman," Drago explodes. "How can you say that? You know there's a statue of my uncle in the village. He was a partisan hero who died fighting the Chetniks." Lenka whispers to Zora and Mirsad, "Welcome to the Markovich family. We have this conversation at least 3 times a day." She rolls her eyes, and Zora feels a tug of laughter. Vesna leans right around the back of her daughter's chair. Cupping her mouth with her hand, she stage whispers to Zora, "And terrified, aren't you? Day by day, Sarajevo is becoming more Muslim." Seeing Zora recoil, Vesna shakes her head.
I don't mean like that. We all know Muslims like Mirsad, but...
Zora is about to respond when an enormous boom ripples through the flat and the tabletop slides into her ribs. The jolt her body receives knocks her chair backwards. A great crack opens in the ceiling, and there's an almighty crash as the Art Nouveau lamp slams into the middle of the dining table. The back of Zora's head thwacks the floor. Her ears ring as if they've been pummeled. She turns her head slowly, her cheek pressing into the glass scattered on the parquet tiles. Vesna and Drago are somehow under the shattered window, their clothes and hair finely dusted with glass. Mirsad is the only one moving. He's pulling himself up, brushing bits of glass from his trousers.
I must be, he says. I have to be going now. It's been... Thank you.
Zora is wondering why Mirsad left in such a hurry. Then it comes to her. The explosion was so loud, the impact so close, that whatever hit the building must have struck the floor above. She hauls herself to her feet and, as quickly as she can, follows him out, dreading what she might find. The bombardment of Sarajevo has begun. After a direct hit to the building, Zora leaves the meal she had been sharing with neighbors and follows Mirsad upstairs to the floor they both share. The door to his flat is ajar. Entering it, she finds a strange and terrible emptiness. Zora finds herself crouching in the darkening hallway. The dust is incredible, coating every surface. Her gaze is continually sucked down the corridor, through the living room, to the hole. The colourless beyond, the outside seeping in. Gradually, she becomes aware of the sound of breathing. In the periphery of her vision, she glimpses a figure standing in a doorway that comes off the corridor. It's also gazing out, hypnotized.
Mirsad?
She says. The figure looks somehow too slender. She stands up, and it withdraws immediately, stepping back into the darkness. Moments later, Mirsad reappears.
Zora,
he says in a flat voice.
How long have you been there?
Mirsad, your place, she says. I'm so... But he cuts her off, pressing his finger lightly to the side of her head.
You need to put something on that cut, he says. Let me take you back to your flat.
Later that night, Zora sweeps up the glass that lies in glistening piles under 3 of her shattered windows, and tapes bin bags over the holes to keep out the rain. Each time she bends, pain sears her lower chest. But she pushes on, determined to get everything in order. The phone call from England that evening was fraught.
"Why aren't you here?"
she screamed at her husband. There was a silence, and when she realized he was crying, she cried also. And now her longing for him is more intense than she has felt in years. When Dubravka came on the line after Franjo, her response was more practical.
"Mum, you're leaving Sarajevo," she said. I'll start making phone calls tomorrow. On her way to work the next morning, Bosnian Serb snipers lie behind sandbags on the tops of buildings and take aim at people in the streets below as if they are sparrows. Sarajevans, Muslim, Croat, Serb, dart across the roads in zigzags in an attempt to dodge the bullets. Anger at the snipers and the men in the hills shakes through her as she enters the classroom. By the afternoon, she's calmer. Walking to her studio, the beauty of her city unfolds around her. She takes in every detail with the keen attention of someone who's about to leave. The Viecnica is fantastically over the top. Zora loves the place. Its stripes of pink and yellow stucco, its decorative crenellations, its white balconies. Built as Sarajevo's town hall by the Habsburgs, for the past 50 years, it's housed the National and University Library on its lower floors. On the top floor, 3 spacious attics have been allocated to Bosnian artists, one from each of the main nationalities. The competition was fierce, and Zora was the winning Bosnian Serb. Upstairs, she spends an age mixing the exact colour. Last night's phone call rattles through her mind. Dubravka and Franjo want her to leave. She said yes, but she will have to be careful. No one likes deserters, as they are starting to be known. Zora can see why. The more people leave, the easier it becomes for the Bosnian Serb nationalists to drive a Berlin-style wall through the city. It's a ridiculous notion. It's simply not possible to divide such a mixed city or country. Zora has dedicated her life to painting Bosnia. After studying painting and sculpture in Paris and Belgrade, she returned home to Sarajevo and at 29 had her first solo exhibition, a series of 30 Ottoman bridges. The next day, a review appeared in an anti-fascist newspaper, which was so glowing Zora had to read it several times. Bosnia has found a painter of bridges in Zora Korčević, whose timeless landscapes waken the senses, the soul. As she read, she felt a rush of fondness for the writer, a certain Franjo Buka, whose words struck her like a love letter. On the hinge of her 30th year, Zora acquired a husband. Franjo's maturity, he was 44 at the time, attracted her strongly. He was tall and thin, and had kind, hazel eyes. Soon, thanks to him, she was known as the painter of bridges throughout Yugoslavia. At the age of 35, Zora was made Professor of Art at the newly opened Academy of Fine Arts, and given the keys to her studio in the Viecnica. Going home that evening, she stops by Mirsad's shop. He is seated at his desk, engrossed in writing. "Mirsad," she says, pushing open the door. He looks up. "Oh, Zora, it's you." And his face relaxes into a smile. He closes the notebook and slips off his reading glasses. "Come on in. How are you?" Zora enters. "Fine, a bit sore, but fine. How are you? Would you like some company home?" Mirsad looks at his watch in surprise. "Just give me a minute," he says. Zora takes in the rows of bookshelves that line the walls. A semicircle of wooden stools and a tray of Turkish coffee cups suggest that friends have spent a pleasant afternoon there. It's comforting to know that this continues to happen. "I can see why Franjo loves spending his afternoons here," she says. "How is he?" Mirsad calls from the back room, where he's disappeared with the coffee cups. "He wants me to leave. My whole family does. I suppose it would be safer. I've made up my mind, though," she says. "I'm going to stay." "Well, I understand that, too." "You do?" He comes out of the back room, wiping his hands on a cloth.
Of course. Sarajevo is our home.
Mirsad and Zora start to accompany each other home at the end of the day. Somehow, talking things over with him, the reports of shelled buildings and panic buying, of more deaths, lose some of their power to shock. At junctions, he takes her arm and guides her across. One morning, when she arrives at the Viechnitsa, lads in black uniforms with machine guns and hunting rifles are clustered at the main entrance.
"Excuse me," she says. "I'm Professor Kolchovich. My workplace is up there."
She points to the windows on the top floor.
"If I could just—"
The guard takes a long drag on the cigarette he is smoking.
"No one's allowed in," he says.
"Can I ask why?"
"The Serbs are up to something. We're expecting trouble today."
Just then another, shorter guard appears. His features open into a broad smile.
"Professor Kolchovich," he says. "My favorite teacher. Do you remember me? It's Faruk. But what are you doing here?"
Before she can answer, Faruk has grasped the situation and is telling the other guard,
"Relax, you big idiot. She can have half an hour."
Guiding her lightly by the elbow, he leads Zora into the building and up the back stairs.
"Listen, Prof, you have 30 minutes. Take everything you can, whatever you need," he says. "You won't be allowed back in here after today."
She starts gathering materials in a large holdall and a few plastic bags. But her eyes blur with tears, and her hands start to shake. Looking out of the window, she sees a sniper lying behind sandbags on a rooftop below, his gun trained on a crossroads. His shoulder flinches, and there is the faint crack of a gunshot. Then she holds open the bags and, moving with urgency, sweeps in everything she can: glue, paperweights, primers, rolls of canvas, a ball of string, a book of poems, paint-clotted brushes, and a pale blue sweater that is not hers. In they all go. Standing before the Goat's Bridge, everything else recedes. She knows it's madness to even consider carrying a painting through those streets, but working on it has been her refuge, and to leave it behind now, well, that's unthinkable. The ticking of the clock and the sound of shells exploding outside grow fainter as Zora starts to paint. She is about to apply the glaze when Faruk knocks loudly at the door. He comes in, looking anxious, and scarcely gives Zora time to wipe clean her brushes before he is helping her with her bags, drawing the door of the studio shut behind her, and pushing her down the stairs, past the guard with the rifle, and out onto the street. It's just past noon. Zora is standing on the pavement, a heavy holdall on her back, and just then an enormous explosion shakes the street. Her knees buckle. The air ripples as if made of gauze. Zora is motionless for a second, and then she starts to run. She runs as she hasn't run since she was a child, flat out, heart hammering. Mortar bombs are falling all along the riverfront, blasts going off every few seconds. Glass crunches, and the air is dark and thick. Smoke pours into her throat. Coughing, she crawls on her hands and knees through the debris, gasping in the clearer air close to the ground. Then the rumbling overhead dwindles and stops. Stumbling over the rubble, dust in her eyes, she picks her way home. Finally, inside the flat, she picks up the phone and dials Dubravka's number. No tone. She presses the clicker several times and checks the connection at the wall, but still nothing. The line's dead. She screams. A brief, sharp scream. She goes back out and rings at Mirsad's door, and then at those of her other neighbours, but no one's home. Downstairs, a thin yellow line shines from under the Markovich's door.
Lenka answers. I need to use your phone.
Lenka shakes her head.
Haven't you heard? The central post office and telephone exchange were blown up this afternoon. All the lines out of the city have been destroyed.
As the summer of 1992 approaches, Zora has been stopped by soldiers from going to her studio in the old town hall. The lifeline of her painting has been cut off at the same time as the telephone lines to the outside world. Sarajevo is now completely under siege. It's on her way to teach her art students that she first sees it. She thinks it's a pile of old rags in the middle of the road. It isn't until she's on the curb, about to cross, that she sees that it is a woman in a filthy white coat. The woman lies lifeless on the tarmac, her back curved as if protectively around a pool of dark blood. Zora looks around for help, but the few people that are there on the street don't seem to notice. On the point of moving forwards to pull the body to the pavement, she checks herself and remains paralyzed on the curb. She could be hit by the same sniper. This might be some sort of trap. Heart beating fast, Zora turns away. She crosses the road further down, away from the exposed junction, waves of shock breaking inside her. She lives off carefully rationed food from her deep freeze, down to one main meal a day. A lasagna that she made for herself and Franjo last autumn stretches for several lunches. She's calculated she has enough food to last 6 weeks. Beyond then, well, the rest of Europe can't do nothing while a city is cut off and starved. Her face has lost some of its fleshiness. She keeps tightening the belt on her trousers. Her hair, normally short, is now chin-length, the deep orange she's dyed it since her 30s, pushed out by black. She's surprised there's only one streak of grey. She decides to let it grow long instead. She no longer sees Mirsad, as she no longer needs accompanying back home from her studio, and when they meet by chance in the corridor, he is always hurrying to or back from his bookshop, a worried look on his face. Apart from her students, whose numbers have dwindled, she hardly sees anyone. Towards the end of May, an early summer heatwave settles on Sarajevo, and, around the same time, the electricity is cut. No news or music can be heard. Lifts have frozen in their shafts. Zora walks slowly up the 8 flights of stairs to her flat, stopping to catch her breath frequently. She can't cook dinner on her electric stove. In the end, she goes to bed early, hoping that things will right themselves by morning. By the end of the second evening without electricity, the food she has divided into rations in the deep freeze is defrosting all at once. The smell of grilled meat works its way into her dreams the next morning, and she wakes up ravenous. Lifting an edge of the rug from the kitchen window, she sees trails of smoke rising up from the neighbouring tower block. For a moment, she thinks she's slept through an almighty attack, but the threads of smoke are too orderly and domesticated. People across the city must be barbecuing the contents of their freezers. A few hours later, she is standing outside Mirsad's flat, a bag of thawed food dripping in each hand. Mirsad opens the door in a billow of barbecue smoke.
"Good timing," he says. "I was just going to invite you over. Come in."
He leads her to the kitchen, where a simple barbecue has been set up under the window. The smell of cooking meat is incredible. Soon they are carrying plates of beef burgers, trout, and chicken drumsticks through to the living dining room. Mirsad lights some candles, and Zora sees, to her relief, that several wooden planks have been nailed over the hole made by the shelling. They eat slowly, taking their time, because they are no longer used to large quantities of food. What they can't eat now, they will offer to their neighbours. It's wonderful when the breeze slips in through the cracks in the wall, cooling their arms and their faces. Mirsad is opening a bottle of warm beer when his eyes fix on a point over her shoulder. Turning, Zora nearly chokes. A bearded figure in crumpled pyjamas is standing in the doorway at the far end of the room.
"What are you doing?"
Mirsad addresses the figure, anger suppressed in each word. Zora glances at him in surprise, and then back at the man or boy, it's hard to tell which in the candlelight. Ignoring Mirsad's agitation, he gives Zora a half-smile. Then he crosses the room, sits down, and helps himself to some meat and a bottle of beer. Mirsad lets out a snort of vexation.
"Relax, Dad," the boy says. "The smell of the meat was killing me. I couldn't stay away any longer."
Zora's eyes widen.
"Samir, is that you? But your hair is so long, and the beard. When did you get back from Budapest? Where's Radmila?"
Mirsad and Samir look at each other. Mirsad pushes his chair back from the table with a sigh.
"I never went to Hungary with Mum."
The story comes out. Samir speaks, in between mouthfuls, while Mirsad leans back in his chair, shoulders hunched defensively. Zora tries to follow, something about Samir being on the peace march at the beginning of April and things turning sour when the shooting started. He stayed with his girlfriend for a few days after because she was scared, but then her family decided they'd be safer in Croatia and whisked her away.
"It was you I saw on the night of the shelling, wasn't it?"
she interrupts. Samir nods. No wonder Mirsad left the Markoviches so quickly. He must have been terrified for his son's life. Mirsad hands a sheaf of letters to Zora.
"Draft notices," he says. "Hand-delivered."
"I got the first one when I returned from my girlfriend's," Samir says.
"Radmila was furious when we spoke on the phone that night," his father continues. "What, fight against boys who could be his cousins?" she screamed at me. We agreed that the best thing to do would be to say that he was in Hungary with her, and for him to lie low for a while. Mirsad says, "We'd no idea the fighting would go on for so long."
Zora nods slowly.
"We've been searched many times, you know," he says. "These obnoxious lads come round in their looted trainers. One day, a soldier will push aside the chest of drawers in the bathroom and find Samir crouching in the cubbyhole. It's all I think about when I'm at work. Then they'll give him a gun and send him straight to the front. He's only a kid. I'm 19, Dad, and my age has nothing to do with it."
They stare in annoyance at each other. Then Samir breaks into a smile and starts on another chicken leg. Zora puts her hand on Mirsad's arm.
"I'm glad I know now,"
she says softly. Mirsad squeezes her hand and smiles too at last. Zora lights more candles, and they start to eat again. Zora has seen very little of Una since the war broke out. Her mother, Milka, tells Zora that Una has gone from being a sunny and extroverted 8-year-old to sullen and brooding. Anto and Miulka ask Zora if she will teach their daughter to paint. Zora, delighted, wonders if they also had her own welfare in mind. They paint side by side at the kitchen table at first. Una watches intently. Then she leans over her paper as she tries to emulate Zora's brushstrokes. Zora is amazed at the concentration of the girl. They paint for several hours in silence. Within a few afternoons, they've used up all the paper, and now there is nothing left to paint on. She is wondering whether to use a tablecloth when Una squeezes her arm. "Let's paint on the wall." "The wall?" Una bites her lip and nods. Something of her old boisterous self flashes in her eyes. Zora laughs. "What shall we paint?" "A tree," Una says at once. The tree doesn't start out as an apple tree, but as a grafting of several trees onto one, its sturdy branches spreading to the corners of the shell-cracked living room. Una takes great pleasure in adding the apples. The plump, round fruit come in oranges, blues, pinks, and green. The paints have been stretched out with white spirit and water. The effect is one of age, as if this were a faded fresco on a monastery wall, a magical tree from a fairy tale. They now live off food from the sky, as Una calls it, relief packages of sugar, oil, tinned meat and fish, pasta and rice that are flown in every 10 days or so in huge military planes. And still, there is not enough of anything. Zora drops by Mirsad's bookshop. The doors are open, and she peers into the gloom. Mirsad is writing at his desk. "What are you always writing so intently?" He lays down his pen. "I'm rewriting the folk tales. You know, the magic ring, the bear's son, the walled-up wife. I love those old tales." Mirsad smiles. "When Samir was little, I used to tell him what I could remember each night. Then I'd invent the rest. That's kind of what I'm doing now." Every 10 days or so, Mirsad's bookshop becomes a distribution point for UN relief food. The government has ordered him to do this, given that he cannot fight, because of a boyhood accident that left him with a leg injury, but he tells Zora he would have done it gladly anyway. Zora volunteers to help. They hand out the boxes as quickly as possible. Mirsad checks each one off a long list. Zora takes trays of nettle tea and water to those outside every so often. As the day heats up, they get into a rhythm, exchanging jokes from time to time. Zora is dizzy with exertion, but it's good to work and interact with others. Later, resting in the shade of the shop doorway, Zora extends her bare legs into the sun. A puff of breeze cools them. The narrow strip of sky overhead is pure cerulean blue, the street quiet and empty. They share some sardines. As if to mark the hour, a series of explosions booms not too far away. The citizens of Sarajevo continue their struggle to survive under siege. By July, the water supply to the city has been cut, and the dangerous task of queuing for water at cisterns takes hours each day. Zora continues to paint a mural of a tree with her neighbor's daughter Una, but not for long. The tree uses up all of Zora's paint. She slits open the metallic tubes with a sharp kitchen knife, and Una scrapes out every last drop of pigment.
What are we going to do now?
We'll think of something. Zora lifts her up and squeezes her. She realizes she's grown very attached to this little girl, who reminds her so much of her own daughter when she was the same age. Zora brings Samir a copy of the newspaper. The front page carries the news that Sarajevo's death toll has passed 6,000. Zora watches Samir scan the 4 narrow columns on each page, a cigarette held loosely between his lips. On the days he discovers that a friend or an acquaintance has been killed, he closes his eyes and sinks into silence. The power comes on. Pop. Just like that. In the middle of the sweltering August night. Zora does not move at first, her eyes adjusting to the glare of the kitchen light. She listens to the hum of vacuum cleaners starting up in the flats above and below hers, the da-da-da of pop music on radios, the rustle of electricity pouring into their lives. She's vacuuming the living room when there's a bright flickering on the TV. She looks up with apprehension. A building is on fire. Great heads of orange flame rush out from tall, gridded windows. Behind the bars, all is molten and roiling like lava. The impression of heat is immense. Zora silences the vacuum and moves closer to the screen. The row of elongated, gridded windows is familiar. Her mouth is as dry as rubble. The thick black smoke parts to reveal that the building is yellow and pink. Her breath, caught high in her throat, bursts out in a single sob. The old town hall is on fire. Perhaps there is still time. Perhaps it has not yet spread. Along the bottom of the screen, a feed of white words is telling her something. The Viechnitsa was hit by 30 incendiary shells at 11 o'clock that evening. Serb nationalists aimed at the glass dome and shattered it. The fire spread rapidly into the National and University Library. Zora pulls her eyes away. She'll go straight there and see what she can do. Taking the stairs 2 at a time, she runs with all her force into someone coming up the other way. They both cry out. A man, out of breath, bare arms streaked with black like artist's charcoal, doubles over, blocking Zora's way. It's Mirsad, his thick hair reeking of smoke. He pants, trying to catch his breath.
"Oh, Mirsad," Zora says. "Let me past, please."
"Where are you going?"
"My studio."
"I've just been there," he says.
"There were lots of us, saving books. We formed a chain and passed the burning books back, trying to save as many as we could."
A trickle of sweat works its way down his temple.
"Please,"
she says, trying to get round him, but he grabs hold of her upper arms.
"Don't you see?" he says. "I tried to go myself. I rushed there with an idea of saving just one painting. But it was too late, Zora. The staircase was in flames."
She twists away and runs back up the steps. She climbs higher and higher. She needs to see the fire, to actually see it. She comes out onto the roof of the building, a space where no one comes. She hasn't been outside at night in months, not even onto her balcony, in case her movement attracted a viewfinder up in the hills. But now she doesn't care. She looks over to the east. There it is. Even though several districts lie between Zora and the blaze, it seems larger and somehow closer than on her television screen. It lights up the eastern end of the city, its minarets and domes glowing orange with the reflection of flames. Black smoke blots out the moon and the stars. Some type of bird, crows perhaps, circled the burning building. The enormous fire hollows in the middle, so that it forms the shape of a mouth. A dismal wind picks up, carrying hot air and the reek of the furnace. She can't tear her eyes from the burning building. It's an offering to the sky, though she's not sure for what purpose. It's a cry for help, a smoke signal to the rest of the world. It's nothing more than entertainment for the Serbs in the hills, a fiery spectacle to break their boredom at the dog end of this fetid summer. She lets out a cry, her dressing gown blowing open, as she stands on the rooftop, a clear target. "You win!" she yells to the hills. She starts to laugh, bending over double, dropping to her knees and laughing. And there, mixed in with her own, she hears the clanging laughter of the tiny woman back in April, and she thinks of Franjo, Dubravka, and her mother, watching the fire on the breakfast news in England the next day. Her family, whom she has not spoken to in 3.5 months, who will be broken with worry. And still, she cannot stop laughing. The wind drops as abruptly as it had risen. Zora feels something on her arm. It is the lightest touch on her bare skin. She looks up. The whole valley is clogged with black smoke, but gradually Zora makes out dozens of black, fluttering objects gusting this way and that in the air. She snatches at one, and it crumbles into dust in her fingers. Another settles on her arm, and she fancies she glimpses the loops and dots of Arabic script before they dissolve into the sweat on her skin. She pincers a third between her thumb and her forefinger and gently teases open the curled-up scrap. Latin script and penciled annotations in the margin of a yellowing page. Looking back to the fire, she realizes that what she took for crows circling the Viejnitsa are the burnt pages of books. The fragments of her paintings will be there too, rising and falling over the pyre. There is the sound of knocking, again and again, but she will not answer. Mirsad, Mulka and Lenka call, "Zora, are you there?" through the door. Someone leaves a jerry can of water outside her flat, and she drinks thirstily. When she looks at herself in the mirror, her pupils are dilated, and her eyes staring like a madwoman's. Soft black traces smear her arms and her face, and her hair is an unkempt lion's mane. Long black roots ring her head, dyed orange ends sticking out. Fragments of burnt matter are caught on them. 3 days later, Zora washes herself slowly and carefully of the black marks. She finds some scissors and cuts the orange from her hair. She goes next door. Samir opens the door. "I'm so sorry, Zora," he says, face taut. Mirsad comes through from the kitchen and puts his arms round Zora, holding her tight. "Take me to the Viejnitsa," she says. "I have to see what's happened with my own eyes." They walk through the streets. Mirsad stops to pluck something from Zora's hair. He holds it between thumb and forefinger for her to see. "These have been falling all over the city for days now. Do you know what people are calling them?" "No." "Black butterflies," he says softly. He peers at the scorched page, as if trying to read it, then carefully places it in his breast pocket. "Burnt fragments of poetry and art, catching in people's hair." She feels her knees give, a drop in her stomach. "Please, Mirsad, I just want to go there." But he does not move.
It was awful, Zora. I've never felt such heat. Friends, strangers, old, young, all of us reaching into the burning building. A human chain to rescue books. But what good did it do? Almost 2 million documents burnt in there. Our national heritage destroyed in a night.
The nearer they get, the hotter and closer the air seems to be. Where the golden dome of the Vocation can normally be seen glimmering over the red-tiled roofs of the artisan shops and grill houses, there is nothing but smoke. Mirsad squeezes her arm and says in a low voice,
"Not all of your paintings were in your studio, were they?"
"Almost all," she says.
"Oh, Zora."
The sun glares, and for the first time, the facade of the building is revealed. It's scorched black, and whole sections of tiling have dropped away. All of the windows, including the stained glass of the stairwells, have gone, leaving blackened holes. She slips her hand from Mirsad's arm and approaches. Where is her studio? Heart beating fast, her gaze keeps skimming over the row of burnt-out windows on the 3rd floor. She wants to retch, but she forces herself to count the windows from the edge of the disfigured building. She looks in through the gridded library window. Great mounds of white embers glow. Smouldering pages still spiral and fall. Her eye follows a page upwards as it rises on a hot air current, and she sees there is no ceiling, that the timbers have burnt clean through. The page continues upwards, and, as Zora's gaze rises with it, the smoke thins, and a patch of blue appears as the sun shines through. There is nothing left. Nothing left at all. She grows dizzy. She almost falls, but Mirsad is there, holding her up. Just then, a carrier bag, blown on a gust of wind, wraps itself round her calf. On impulse, she kneels down and scoops handfuls of the ashes and charred pages, the black butterflies, into the bag. When the plastic bag is full, they turn and make their way back. The shelling of the Vocation and the conflagration that destroyed the National Library, including Zora's studio and all her paintings, has left the citizens of the besieged city stunned and grief-struck. The effect on Zora is of profound desolation. "We're all refugees now," Zora wrote in one of her unposted letters to Franjo. "We spend our days waiting for water, for bread, for humanitarian handouts. Beggars in our own city." The days that follow the fire are raw and smoke-streaked. Zora stops writing letters. There's nothing to hold her together anymore. She keeps the plastic bag of ashes in an empty kitchen cupboard. Mirsad comes one morning with the news that he's heard of a place where, if you pay enough money, you can make a phone call. That afternoon, they find themselves in the stairwell of a smart apartment block. They queue for hours. The man whose flat and phone line it is has fat baby cheeks and a stomach that spills in layers over expensively belted trousers. His small eyes glint, while his soft white hands unfold to wait for her money. She counts out half a month's salary in Deutschmarks. He licks his fingers and counts them out again. 5 minutes, he says.
You call whoever it is you want to call. They call you back. If they're not in, that's not my problem. If the line is cut halfway through, that's not my problem either. Okay?
After the first ring, Dubravka picks up. Zora, despite the hours of queuing to speak to her, is not at all prepared for the familiar sound of her daughter's voice. Zora cannot speak. Tears are streaming down her cheeks. "Hello? Dee speaking. Who is it?" She mustn't cry. Not now, with so little time. But she can't stop the tears from falling. The first she has cried since the fire. A silence. "Mom? Is that you?" A broken edge has entered Dubravka's voice, and she's half crying too now. Question after question tumbles out. "Are you okay, Mum? Where are you? How are you calling?" She calls out to her father, and then gives in to huge, heaving sobs. "I'm okay, darling," she says. "I'm okay. I just wanted to hear your voice, to speak." The door opens, and the gerbil-cheeked man steps in, face set in anger.
"Tell them to call you back or you'll have to pay again," he says. He looks at his watch. "Only 4 minutes now."
Zora gives her daughter the number hastily, stumbling over the numbers so that she has to repeat them. When Dubravka rings back, Franjo has joined the conversation on a separate line. His voice sounds older, and he keeps stopping for breath in odd places. All three of them cry, and then, aware that time is running out, a rapid exchange of information begins, in which they ask her if she's well, what and how much she's eating, if she has enough water to drink, and if friends are looking out for her. They watched the fire on TV, and they can't bear to think of her loss, but they are working on ways to get her out. Maybe she could get a place on a convoy, or return in a lorry that brings donated clothes and blankets to the city, that sort of thing. They've talked to the Home Office about getting a temporary visa. They want to make sure she gets out before winter comes. Her mother isn't doing badly. Zora isn't to worry. Ruby's a darling. She has a plastic milk float. She loves pushing around. The man steps into the room again and taps his watch pointedly. Zora, Dubravka and Franjo exchange rapid goodbyes and hang up. Mirsad is there, leaning against the wall. She suddenly feels very warmly towards this man who is helping her. Without him, she'd be quite alone. He puts an arm round her shoulders and squeezes. "You look better for having spoken to them," he says. "I can't thank you enough." That evening, she plucks 2 pigeons that she has caught in a trap on her windowsill. She cooks them on the small makeshift stove that their floor shares. Anto had made it by placing a metal grill on top of 2 bricks in the corridor. She shares the meagre meal with Anto, Milka and Una, inviting them into her kitchen. "Zora, we're so sorry about your studio," Anto says, and Zora nods. It is the conversation she has with everyone nowadays, and, although she knows they mean well, each time the fire is mentioned, she feels as if all hope is being squeezed from her. "But it's okay," she says. "My daughter's trying to arrange a way out." Then, remembering Anto and Milka's disapproval of those who leave, she looks down at the tiny pigeon carcass on her plate, sucked of every last piece of flesh. "I'm not surprised," says Anto. "Awful to be here alone, after losing everything," Milka says gently, putting a hand on her arm. She didn't expect this. Tears well up. It happens so quickly at the moment. And as her shoulders heave, Anto says, "You're down on the list for the Red Cross convoy, of course." She looks up. "Yes," Milka says. "When was it leaving? Next month, was it?" Just like that, hope is handed to her again. Zora has no idea about the Red Cross convoy. They tell her it has been in the papers and on the radio. 40 coaches or so, half leaving for Croatia and half for Serbia in October. "Talk to Lenka about it. I'm sure she'll know," Miolka says, and smiles. Hope flowers extravagantly. Zora waits impatiently for the weekend when Lenka will get back from the job she has at last found, interpreting for the French UN officers at the airport. On Saturday morning, Lenka answers the door, and, for a moment, Zora has no idea who she is. Her hair is swept back in a soft French pleat, pearls adorn her ears, and she wears a navy skirt and jacket. "Zora, my mother's clothes," she says, with an embarrassed wave of her hand. Lenka offers Zora a seat. "How about some real Italian coffee? They have everything at the airport shop. I love my new job. I'm interpreting from Serbo-Croat to French and vice versa. The Colonel's wonderful. Listen, Mum and Dad are out, but please feel free to wait." Zora takes a breath. "Actually, it's you I wanted to see," she says. "Do you know anything about the Red Cross convoy that's leaving next month?" Lenka nods. "Yes, of course. They're evacuating up to 2,000 people before winter sets in. There are plenty of places." "Do you know how I can get one?" "The elderly and the sick have priority, but there are so many coaches going you'll be fine. I'll speak to the Colonel first thing on Monday." "Will he be able to get me on the list?" "Oh, yes, he knows everyone." For the first time in a long time, Zora feels she can breathe freely. She sips the coffee Lenka makes for her. Its strong scent and rich taste seem to seal some sort of promise. Zora begins preparing to leave straight away. She goes to Marcale marketplace with a trolley of items that cannot be used as fuel, worn or eaten, and, reluctantly, 5 paintings from her mother's flat. She exchanges them for tins of food, pasta, and lentils that will last the month. Turning to leave, a table easel on a nearby stall catches her eye. There's a shoebox of half-used paints, brushes, and palette knives, and several primed canvases beside it. Her eyes flick up to take in the middle-aged woman who is selling them. She walks on, but by the time she gets to the street, she knows she has to go back. She asks the woman why she's selling her paints. "They're my husband's, but he's going blind. No medicine for his condition." "God, what is it?" "Glaucoma," the woman says. "He's had a mild version for years, completely controllable with the right drugs, but now, with no medicines coming through, well, last week we faced the fact he would never paint again." "I'll buy them all," Zora says abruptly, surprising herself. The woman names a price. Zora knows it is twice as much as the paint and easel would have fetched before the war, let alone now, but she can't bear the thought of this unknown painter losing his sight. She pulls out her last remaining banknotes from her bag. The woman, eyes on the money, seems to hesitate, as if about to say it's too much, but Zora pushes the notes into her hand and closes the woman's fingers over them. The woman looks down for a moment, and when she looks up, her eyes are brimming with tears. That night, Zora lights a candle, opens the shoebox, and examines the paints of the unknown artist. She can tell he was a landscape painter, as he has more or less the same colour palette as she uses. Slowly at first, then gathering pace, she starts to paint. As she paints, the roar of the flames in her head subsides, and, for the first time in a long time, the night grows hushed and still. Mirsad sits, head in his hands, across the kitchen table. He tells Zora that Samir woke up a few mornings before, got dressed, and went out. When he returned, several hours later, he was in uniform. He'd enlisted, and they'd send him straight to the front. Zora sees images of Samir, chain-smoking, cooped up in that darkened flat all summer. She thinks of how he joked that he wanted to join the army just to stretch his legs. "We had a huge row," Mirsad says. "He said he finally understood who the aggressors and who the victims were, and that he wanted to defend his city against the Serbs in the hills." "Oh, Mirsad," Zora says. "It was as if I didn't know him. One moment he would be saying that he was a parasite, eating all my food rations, and that we would both starve. The next he would lash out against me and his mother, saying we don't take him seriously. You know you can always come round here, any time you want, if you need the company," Zora says. "That is, until—" There's a silence, and Zora closes her eyes. She's leaving in a couple of weeks. Lenka has confirmed her place on the convoy. On his way out, Mirsad lifts a candle to examine the new artwork that lines the walls of the hall. "It's good to see you're doing well now," he says, kissing her on the cheek. "You're a strong woman, Zora Korčević." With the help of Lenka, her neighbour's daughter, Zora has secured a place on a UN evacuation convoy. In the process of selling some of her belongings at the market in preparation for her departure, she ended up buying some paints from the wife of a blind artist. Having thought she would never paint again, Zora finds herself painting prolifically. Her Fire series is executed rapidly. She's intoxicated by the brightness of the colours and the formlessness of the flames, which seem to unleash a new, impatient energy in her. When she's used all the canvases, she tears the fly leaves from books and uses flattened humanitarian aid boxes. When her paints start to run out, she begins incorporating other materials into her work. Anything that's to hand. Pigeon feathers, spent bullets, twisted bits of shrapnel, the burnt furls of books and the ashes she gathered outside the Viechnitsa. Una resumes their art classes, running into the flat with glee. They experiment with using the green, blue and pink food dyes from the back of Mulka's kitchen cupboard, grinding the rubble from broken walls into powder and binding it with water to make stiff coloured pastes. Una adds lumpy plums and pears to the tree in the living room, while Zora uses the pastes for her multimedia works of art. Now she stands in the hallway, where the walls bristle with feathers, and turns over Mirsad's news. With Samir out of hiding, they'll both be able to talk freely with others. Zora is the only other person Samir has seen since April. She's been anxious enough about leaving Mirsad, but even more so about Samir, wondering how he would cope without her afternoon visits, alone in an increasingly cold, dark flat. At the Academy of Fine Arts, where teaching has started again, she'll be demonstrating a technique at the front of the class when, all of a sudden, she'll feel split. Part of her is there, with her exhausted students, while part of her is in her daughter's kitchen in Wiltshire, with her family, empty plates pushed away in front of them, drinking wine while the big American fridge, full of food, hums next to them. "Are you all right, Mrs. Korčević?" one of her students will ask. She'll realise she's halted in the middle of her lecture. "Of course," she'll say brightly, and continue. Her students worship her now, impressed by her energy and that she continues to paint despite the loss of her studio. More and more are turning up for class. They're inspired by what they take to be a show of resistance. The young women come carefully made up, overgrown hair twisted into styles that hide their lack of dye. The young men, boys really, come in between shifts on the front, trying to shake off whatever they have seen and done. Many of them, both men and women, lie down on the floor as soon as they arrive to conserve energy after their long hikes across town. One by one, they get to their feet and clip paper to their easels. Squeezing tiny amounts of acrylic and oil onto their palettes, she can see in the way they focus and stand a little straighter that they are momentarily stepping beyond the war and the hunger, the not knowing if they will make it to the end of each day. She hasn't told them that she's leaving, of course. Far from a figure of resistance, she is, in fact, a fraud. She can't bear to think of the disappointment they'll feel when they find out. She and Mirsad continue to distribute relief food. Each time they get to his shop in the dark blue light before dawn, the queue waiting for the UN truck to arrive is longer, stretching around the block. The fear of a winter without enough food or heating is stamped in the hunched shoulders and tense faces of those waiting. No one speaks. Mirsad and Zora are hungry themselves. They light the stove and invite as many people as will fit inside. Once out of the cold, small bursts of conversation, even laughter, start up. The humiliation of waiting to be fed by foreign donations pushed aside for a while. Mirsad lends the remaining stock of his bookshop on a basis of trust. Of course, some books are stolen, but most are returned. People often stay a while to chat about what they have read, sitting on the circle of stools and swapping gossip, as if all were normal. One day, as a cluster of people linger after the food has been handed out, an old man called Safet announces it's his birthday and pulls a handful of plums from his pocket. He places them on the counter. "Come on, you have to match me now," he says. There are some grumbles, and Zora watches as people slip out the door, leaving only Safet, Mirsad, and Zora in the shop. Feeling terrible for the man, she sets about making some chicory coffee, which she pours half her ration of sugar into. The three of them sit, shivering, sipping the sweet water. Then the door opens, and a woman who left earlier returns with some firewood under her arm. She goes straight to the stove and starts building the fire. A second person returns with a piece of cheese, and a third with some flatbread his wife has just baked. Each time the door opens, Safet perks up more. Over the next hour, they all come back, adding their gifts, no matter how small, to the counter. They eat and drink and read sections to each other from books, which they discuss animatedly. Zora watches Mirsad's face soften and engage. An hour before the 10 o'clock curfew, he springs up and ushers people home. A week before she's due to leave, Zora visits Mirsad's bookshop to make sure he's coping without Samir. He's in a quiet mood, and she finds herself talking too much. "You might find you're both less lonely, ironically, now that you can talk to other people freely," she says. "Plus, it will boost Samir's morale to be doing something rather than nothing. I guess it's good, in a way, that he's no longer confused about which side he's on." He's been moving about the shop as she speaks, sliding books back into place on the shelves, moving papers from one pile to another. Now he turns to face her. "You don't need to lecture me, Zora," he says quietly. "I love my boy. He is my everything.
The reason I don't want him to fight is not because of any confusion. It's quite clear to me that the Serbs are the aggressors in Bosnia and the Croats to blame in Herzegovina. I don't want Samir to fight because I don't want my son to die." She stares at him, dismayed. That wasn't what she was saying at all. A hostile space seems to have opened up between them, and she's not sure how to close it again. At the same time, something flares inside her, and she resents his words. "Well, thank you for the water," she says, putting the glass down. But he nods without smiling. She leaves the shop. She packs and repacks the one suitcase she is allowed. She smiles at Franjo's photo in the living room each time she passes, her eyes seeking his. Una comes to say goodbye, her face pinched and her eyes red with rubbing. She gives Zora a drawing of a deep green lake, with orange mountains in the background, under an indigo sky. Written on the back, "I love you." Zora scoops her up and holds her close. The convoy is postponed by a week, and then by 10 days, because the government army is convinced that able-bodied men are using it to flee the city rather than fight. Around the beginning of November, the temperature plummets to below freezing. No one is prepared for such an early winter. Zora worries that the roads will be too icy for the coaches, but then an announcement is made in the papers. The Red Cross convoy will be leaving on the 15th, no matter what. On the evening of the 14th, Lenka comes by, face pale. Zora has just finished sewing her savings into the hem of her long winter coat. "There's no space, Zora," she whispers. "What do you mean?" "There was a huge rush of people at the last moment. We hadn't predicted it at all," she says. "The postponements, the notices in the paper, the sudden drop in temperature, everyone wants to leave." "I want to leave." Zora points to her suitcase waiting by the door. Lenka puts her hand on Zora's arm. Zora shakes it off. "You're not old enough, Zora. I'm so sorry. The over 60s and the ill are prioritized. We never imagined that all the seats would go." Lenka carries on talking. A bottle is pressed into Zora's hands. Whiskey. But what she's saying is impossible. Zora has to go. She said goodbye to Mirsad, Samir, Una, everyone. Her family is expecting her. Lenka starts to cry. "I'll see if I can call Franjo on the colonel's line and let him know. I'm so sorry, Zora. I just came to tell you. I have to go back to the airport now." She leaves, and Zora sinks to the floor. There are photos on the front page of the paper of the convoy leaving. Over 2,000 people were evacuated. UN vehicles accompanied the convoy out of Sarajevo. Gunshots whistled as the 15th coach crossed Sarajevo Field, the area of no man's land behind the airport, but no one was hurt. More fetching water and food, more washing clothes in buckets, more bending double to cross the road behind the moving shield of the United Nations armoured vehicles. Day after day of this, every day a little worse than the one before. There's a framed photo of Franjo and herself on the wall. They're sitting on the boat back to Dubrovnik after a day of sunning and swimming off the rocks of a nearby island. It's just of their heads and shoulders, the sea glittering behind. Zora has looked at it frequently. She's fixed on every detail. His long Slavic nose, the protruding mole above his lip, the dear lines that emanated out from his eyes. She takes it down from the wall and places it in the drawer on top of the letters that will never be sent or read.
Other photos of her family follow, till her walls are bare, apart from Una's tree. Less painful this way. She draws a line. The war and Sarajevo are all there is. Snow has arrived in Sarajevo, and the fierce cold of winter begins to gnaw at the besieged inhabitants of the city. Weak and hungry and frozen, Zora is not sure she can go on. Mirsad and Samir arrive, stamping snow from their boots. An old-fashioned tin stove is awkwardly cradled in their arms. Samir found the stove in an abandoned cottage up near the front. Now that he has 2 days' leave, they will have plenty of time to install it. "In my flat?" Zora says. "Yes," says Samir. "No point putting a stove in at ours. Too much damage. The rain and the wind blow straight through. We thought we could pass the flue through one of your living room windows," Mirsad says gently. "I could then come and join you from time to time, if you don't mind, that is." Zora gives a smile, her chapped lips cracking. It's been so long since something good has happened. Working quickly, they nail the back of a wardrobe across the living room window closest to the kitchen, position the stove beneath, and run the flue out through a circular hole. And Mirsad drives in more nails to make sure everything is secure. They bring armfuls of splintered wood, the rest of the wardrobe. Zora fetches some newspaper from Franjo's desk to use as kindling, and, within a matter of minutes, a fire is crackling. Waves of heat pulse into the cold, damp room. The three of them stand around the little stove, warming their hands and the fronts of their legs. The kitchen, the favoured room in the spring and the summer, as it is the furthest from the hills and so the least likely to be shelled, has now lost its former status due to the cold. Mirsad helps Zora drag the mattress from the kitchen to the living room so that she can sleep near the stove. The area immediately around the stove, where the mattress, stools and cushions have been arranged, has become the hub of the flat. Almost all activity takes place there. Cooking, sitting, eating, talking, making art, washing with a glassful of icy water over a bucket, and sleeping. Each night, Zora, Mirsad, Samir, if he's there, and sometimes others press up as close to the stove and each other as possible, leaving dark emptiness on the other side of the living room. Most days, around noon, when the light is good, Una comes for an art session. It takes her a long time to smile and forgive Zora for nearly leaving. Zora has trained herself to push out all thoughts of her family, of the possibility of a world beyond Sarajevo, of anything but what she has in her hands and can see with her eyes. At the academy, she gives herself fully to the young men and women who make it through the snowy streets to her classes. Mirsad comes every afternoon now. They light the stove around dusk and keep it going till 7 or 8 in the evening. That way, they're able to cook 1 hot meal a day, and to keep warm in the early hours of the evening. Like everyone in Sarajevo, they go to bed early to conserve energy. Samir joins them for a few days every 5th night or so. At first, when he returned from wherever the front line was, he said it felt good to be doing something at last, rather than hiding like a scared child. It was good to stretch his legs on the hike up the mountain, good to put his back into digging more trenches. Holding the Bosnian Serbs back, he could hold his head high for the first time since the war began. But now, as the snow and shells continue to fall, he is often too exhausted to speak or even sleep when he returns. The neighbours start to come round more frequently, drawn by the stove and the brightly painted walls. Anto, Mjulka and Una arrive first, shortly after 4, and Vesna and Drago often come soon after. More rarely, Almaza and Osman drop in for an hour, exhausted, at the end of their long shifts at the hospital. Samir and Lenka are there intermittently. After cooking and eating their one meal of the day in silence, the gathering comes to life for a few hours, and they exchange the black-humoured jokes they've overheard while queuing for food and water earlier that day.
"Tell us a story, Mirsad,"
Una says at some point, and Mirsad reaches for his red book, which is now almost full. Often, when he can't decipher his own writing, and his eyes feel the strain of reading in candlelight, he will close the book softly, look at all his listeners in turn, then smile and proceed to the end. Whether speaking from memory or inventing, Zora cannot be sure. Anto brings his guitar, and they sing, sometimes even dance. When Lenka and Samir are both there, Zora notes how they always sit close to one another on cushions on the floor. Pausing in the doorway one night, Zora sees Mirsad look at her with the same intensity that Samir looks at Lenka. He smiles, and then looks down at his book, which is open on his lap. She wants, in that moment, to kiss his eyelids, his mouth. After a while, people get up and stretch and say good night. When only Mirsad is left, Zora reaches over and opens his book. She draws the candle closer. There's an inscription on the first page. "For your writing, with all my love, Radmila." "You must miss her," she says. He's silent for so long, she's worried she's been intrusive. "I don't really think about her that much, to tell you the truth," he says at last. He turns to look at her. "You see, I don't know where she is."
"I thought she was in Hungary."
Mirsad sighs.
"Maybe. The last time I called, the friend she was staying with told me she'd moved to a hotel. It sounded like they'd had a row. That was back in April. She could be anywhere."
Zora waits.
"We hadn't been getting on for a long time. It was a type of separation we were trying when she went to Budapest. The friend she was staying with was more of a, well, someone she thought she might like better than me."
"You mean another man?"
"Yes."
"And they had a row?"
"Yes."
"And you don't know where she is?"
"No."
"Oh, Mirsad," Zora says. "I'm so sorry. Does Samir know?"
"I'm sure he knew something wasn't right. Hard to hide screaming rows when you live in a small flat. Our marriage has been loveless for a long time. But she's Samir's mother, and we wanted, well, I wanted, to try for his sake."
Zora nods and looks away, caught off guard by the bright sensation of happiness that comes to her. On the winter solstice, Zora organizes an open house in her flat. She asks students of hers who live close by to bring along their own art, a piece or two each, and to get in touch with any other students they can. To bring some light into the shortest day, she asks each person to donate one candle, if they are able. Mirsad contributes some relief food, and they make a spiced lentil soup to hand out. Anto and Mjulka bring several bottles of the rice wine they have been fermenting at home. Una comes dressed in red dungarees, her fringe cut on a diagonal.
"I did it myself,"
she tells Zora shyly. Miraculously, 9 of her art class make it. They arrive from mid-morning, in high spirits, works of art under their arms. Samir hooks the radio up to a car battery and tunes in to a crackly pirate station playing Ella Fitzgerald. All at once, her shrunken flat is overrun by students, putting up artwork, laughter in each room. Una tugs her hand and takes her out into the corridor. The stairwell, a lit candle on every second or third step, has been transformed. Brightly coloured landscapes painted on cardboard from flattened relief boxes decorate the walls, masking the multiple cracks from the constant shelling. Teenagers from the lower floors of the block are sitting chatting on cushions. Mirsad welcomes everyone with a cup of soup. As dusk falls, only those who live in the tower block remain. There's perhaps a dozen of them. Anto fetches his guitar, and a bottle of Slivovitz magically materializes. Lenka disappears downstairs to reappear in a dress, pink lipstick freshly applied, and Samir invites her to dance with a mock bow. Soon everyone is dancing. Mirsad holds Zora close as they move together. Resting her cheek on his shoulder, Zora wonders if she's ever hosted a more joyful exhibition. He turns his head and kisses her on the mouth. A jolt of surprise. Everyone has gone, and they are still dancing. They have been dancing for a long time, their bodies pressed close, when he kisses her again. His lips are full and soft and urgent. Her fingers explore his hair and the nape of his neck. There is the smell of smoke and the taste of him, and they are moving together on the mattress, his weight on top of hers. Icicles drip on the other side of the room. She has imagined this, wondered about this for a long time. And she wants to laugh, and she wants to cry. Only the present exists. Today, and today, and today. She will not question it. In the mornings, they lie in each other's arms and listen to gauge how heavy the shelling is that day. If it's too violent out, they might spend the entire day in bed by the stove, making love, reading, writing, and talking. Mirsad whittles a splinter of wood to a point for Zora and holds the end in the stove till it scorches. She uses the blackened stick to make sketches of him on the ripped-out fly-leaves of books. She's never known such spaciousness of time. At the dark heart of the year, a flower of light has opened up. "This is the happiest I've ever been," Zora says. There's silence for a moment, and then they both start laughing, really laughing from their bellies. "You know what I mean," she says, blushing. "We're alive. Really alive." In the midst of the dark heart of the year, a light and a passion has blossomed between Mirsad and Zora. Their happiness almost protects them from the brutality of the war outside, in the city under siege. It's the hour before dusk, and they've all gathered as usual in Zora's dark, smoky flat, when Samir arrives, carrying Una in his arms. Her arms and legs dangle, and her head rests against his chest. Zora senses Mirsad relax as he gets up to greet his son. But he freezes halfway up, because Samir is panting and shaking, proffering Anto and Mulka, their daughter, in his outstretched arms.
I brought her straight here.
He breaks off. Anto and Mulka jump up. Zora and Almaza too. Mulka touches Una's cheek, and Zora reaches for her swaying hand. She is warm and soft. A line of blood runs from her temple across her cheek and disappears into her snow-soaked scarf. When Anto lifts the torn edge of her bobble hat, they see a shell fragment, like a sharp piece of flintstone, jutting from the side of her head. Mulka grows very still, and Zora turns to hold her before she swoons. Anto takes his daughter in his arms, speaking to her tenderly, one hand cradling her head. They wait for Osman, whom Almaza has hurried downstairs to fetch. They lay her out on the mattress, encircled by candles, but Osman, just back from a 24-hour shift at the hospital, can do nothing. The shrapnel has lodged too deep in her brain. She hardly bleeds, just gets gradually colder and colder, Mulka and Anto talking to her in low voices the whole time. Una had been coming home from band practice in the neighbouring building. Maybe the sun had shone for a moment, and the glitter of the snow on the swings had been too much to resist. Samir, returning home from a week on the front, had emerged from the alley to see the flame and black smoke of a shell strike, and a child's figure crumple across the spinning roundabout. New Year. Zora would normally be lying close to Mirsad at this time, in the still hour before dawn, just their stomachs ticking side by side in emptiness. But now he has gone, swallowed by the void. Earlier, she packed in a frenzy, grabbing at things and pushing them into her battered black suitcase. The slapping of the bin bag against the window frame catches Zora's attention. Snow has heaped up on the parquet floor. She has to stop the cold from entering. But when she gets to the glassless window, she's unable to stop herself from raising the flap and peering out for what might be the last time for a long time. The mountains press close, and folds of silencing snow lie on the rooftops of the houses below. She pins the bin bag down, presses the duct tape back in place. A fragment of memory from the night before surfaces. Mirsad was reading a letter. He told her it was wonderful news. She feels in her coat pocket and finds the envelope, which had been taped to her mailbox in the lobby when she'd returned from the water queue yesterday. Dear Zora, I'm sending this note with a journalist. I hope you are well. The good news is I've made it to the BBC centre in Kiselyak. I will try to enter Sarajevo tomorrow morning with a friend. Pack tonight and be ready to leave at 5 a.m. We'll come to your apartment and will need to leave immediately. Sending love, Stephen. She asked Mirsad to translate it, but she does not believe it. She stopped believing in the outside world and the possibility of leaving long ago. Shivering, she tries to remember where Mirsad has gone and when he will come back. But her thoughts have frozen, just beyond reach. The fire has burnt down to a few glowing embers. She adds a torn-up paperback to the stove, but nothing happens. The temperature has dropped further, and everything is grinding to a halt. She would normally be in Mirsad's arms now, sleeping through all of this. Now, though, she must not sleep. She might not wake. Almaza tells her that more people are dying of hypothermia at the moment than from war wounds. The room is starting to spin. The stool lurches underneath her. This is it. A solitary flame springs up in the stove, then another, and another. Heat pulses towards her. With numb fingers, she tries to rip the covers from another book, but cannot do it, so she pushes the entire thing into the stove. Smoke gusts into the room as the dry pages curl with flame. She will be all right now. Now she will be all right. His padded ski jacket shines with alien newness as he comes towards her. Her front door must have been open. "Zora, it's me," he says. He is speaking English. "Thank God you're alive." He draws her to him. She inhales the scent of washing powder and soap in wonder. "Stephen," she says, her voice coming out a croak. "You've come, Stephen," she says. "Good." She strokes his face, saying the word good over and over. Stephen pulls a black wallet from his jacket and hands Zora a photograph. Oh, how lovely! Franjo and Dubravka are standing in front of a gate which leads to a grassy field. Ruby sits on the gate between them. Zora touches their faces, one by one. She glances up at Stephen and smiles. He has his head cocked, a look of shock on his face. She grows self-conscious of her long, unkempt hair, the gaps in her smile where 2 teeth have fallen out, the unwashed stink of her, and looks down. Just then there is the muffled sound of a horn beeping down in the forecourt. "That's Dutch Eddie," Stephen says. "We've got to get going. Is that your suitcase in the hall?" But when Zora gets to her suitcase, the corridor ripples, and she stumbles, the wall sliding up her back. Stephen crouches in front of her. "My God, how long is it since you had anything to eat? I should have thought." He produces a bread roll and a bar of chocolate from his rucksack and presses them into her hands. He sets a thermos flask down on the ground beside her. Straightening up, he takes her suitcase in one hand. "I'll be right back," he says, then sets off down the stairs. Tearing the soft centre from the bread roll, she pushes it into her mouth with a square of chocolate, saliva coming instantly. There is hot coffee in the flask, real Nescafé, with a strong shot of whiskey. She sucks the chocolate from her fingers, then stands up slowly, wary of dizziness. There is something else. In the icy forecourt, a broad-shouldered man in army camouflage and a fur hat is smoking. He beckons for Zora to follow him to the back of the lorry. He signals for her to climb aboard, and then into a large box. Zora looks towards Stephen in alarm. "He knows what he's doing," he says, speaking slowly, so she will understand. "He's done this before." He and Stephen clasp her under each elbow and lift her in. The box is full of blankets, which they arrange around her, padding her in as she hugs her knees close to her chest. She's shivering again. Stephen passes her the flask of coffee. Dutch Eddie gives her 2 Mountaineer's heat pads to hold. "1 hour, I promise," he says, placing another couple of blankets on top of her and closing the lid. The blackness is awful, her limbs unbearably cramped. She smells Mirsad close to her and cries out to him. The lorry picks up speed. They must be on the main road out of the city to the airport, Sniper Alley. She wonders what the plan is. Twice, bullets strike the back of the truck. The brakes come on abruptly. They've come to the first checkpoint, the government one. They would send her back, punish her as a deserter. A gust of freezing air as the back is opened, followed by the bounce of approaching footsteps. Zora stops breathing. Mirsad's limpid blue eyes come to her, floating in front of her in the blackness. The words Marlborough and Black Label resound through the air. The men get off the lorry, and Zora lets out her breath in a damp rush. A few minutes later, they come to what must be the UN checkpoint. If the UN protection force were to allow Bosnians to escape, the Serbs in the hills would accuse them of taking the Bosnian side and would start shooting down the relief planes. Hearing the back of the lorry being opened again, Zora moves her lips in silent prayer. But no one climbs aboard this time, thank God. At the third and final checkpoint, the Serbs halt the lorry. For an interminable stretch of time, nothing. Not a sound. The cold seeps through her skin into her tissues, her tendons, her bones. Eventually, there's the slap of a palm against the side of the lorry, and the engine starts.
"Where are we?"
She shouts above the blizzard.
Out! Out of Sarajevo!
The fur-hatted man shouts back. Her legs won't uncurl from their bent position, and they have to carry her round to the front of the lorry. She sits between the two men, Stephen's arm around her, and cries into Stephen's pillowy chest, his hand gentle, cautious, on the back of her head. With the help of an aid worker named Dutch Eddie, Zora's son-in-law Stephen has smuggled her out of Sarajevo, hidden in the back of a lorry. Dutch Eddie chain smokes as he drives. He's helped 38 people reunite with their families, usually in the Netherlands. He's no connection with Bosnia, but couldn't just sit at home watching the news. He set up an official charity, has all the UN-required paperwork, brings donated blankets and clothes to orphanages. He was about to go home when he ran into Stephen in Kiselyak, asking everyone how he could get his mother-in-law out. He speaks in a mixture of English and Serbo-Croat. She understands most of it, and is thankful to be distracted. She pulls her coat tightly round her, Mirsad's familiar smell holding her, and it strikes her this is not her coat at all. It's his coat she's wearing. She looks at the long sleeves she's had to fold back at the cuff, holds the lapel to her nose, and inhales. No wonder she's felt him so close all day. She tries to remember which coat he took when he left last night, but can't picture it. They'd both been crying so helplessly. The high whistle of anxiety that has been sounding all day in her ears explodes. She picks through her memory, which has gaps like a burnt-out house. He'd wanted her to go, convinced her to go, when she'd cried that she could never leave him. Then he went out to fetch wood from his bookshop, so their last night together would be warm. But he never came back. It's been -20 at night for weeks now. She shudders, and an image of him frozen on the street comes to her, but she pushes it down. Perhaps, once there, he wasn't able to face the journey back and settle down with a fire. Maybe he simply closed his eyes for a moment, fully intending to be back by morning. They never said goodbye. She pictures him returning to her flat at some point today to find it empty and her gone. She didn't even leave a note. Another memory from yesterday evening. He was sitting on the stool by the stove, back turned to her. "How can you leave me?" he said quietly. Not even a question. She was standing in the doorway. She'd made up her mind to go. "I'll never stop loving you, Mirsad, you hear me? Every time you think of me, know I'll be thinking of you." And she'd hoped he'd say it back to her, that he'd turn around and look at her with forgiveness, understanding, absolution, with his endless kindness. But he'd stood up and said flatly, "We're out of wood." Stephen takes a swig from the flask and starts his story, pausing every so often for Dutch Eddie to translate. She listens intently. He tells Zora that he and Dee contacted every organisation they could think of to try and get her out after the Red Cross convoy failure. No success. At this point, Stephen said he would go. He got in touch with a friend at the Times newspaper and asked if they'd like to publish a journal of his mission to save his mother-in-law. Yes, certainly. They provided him with a press card to get him through checkpoints and a bulletproof vest. On New Year's Eve, Stephen flew to Split on the Croatian coast. He met a journalist in a hotel bar who offered him a lift the next day to the BBC centre in Kisaljak, just outside Sarajevo. Stephen spent a depressing week there. Eventually, he met Dutch Eddie. Eddie drops them off in parley. He takes off his fur hat to embrace Zora, and she cries. She feels she's known him much longer than just a few hours. He's going on to an orphanage in eastern Bosnia. They're going northeast to Belgrade, and from there to the airport in Budapest. They're in luck. A coach is leaving in an hour for Belgrade. There's no heating on the coach. The other passengers sit in silence, entombed in long coats, boots stuffed with newspaper, hats pulled down low over their faces. They're mostly old people and off-duty soldiers returning home to Serbia. Rubbing a hole with her coat sleeve in the frozen condensation on the windowpane, Zora watches the landscape unfold. Bosnia is endless forest and rock, but now everything is rearranged, in flux. Mountains are mined and hostile. Place names have been crossed out. Cyrillic lettering replaces the Roman alphabet. They are in Republika Srpska now. They pass through a village. A steep-roofed house has been burnt down, huge sections of wall missing. A jerry-can stove and sodden mattress peep out from under the drifts inside. At the end of a high plateau, figures trudge the slushy streets of a market town, clutching their belongings in plastic bags. They pass through more villages, but mostly it's just trees on the long, slow descent to Zvornik. They cross the river Drina in the early morning. They are in Serbia. They're out of the war. She sleeps for almost 20 hours when they get to Belgrade, her limbs leaden, a dull residue of pain troubling her hands and her feet. Her eyes flick open in the darkness of her room, and she lies under the heft of her duvet, heart drumming, ears straining to hear the sound of gunfire and shells exploding. Gradually, it comes to her. She's in a warm, clean hotel room near the coach station. The white walls of the room won't split open at any moment, sucking the outside in. She's safe. She'd forgotten rooms like this exist. Smooth cream walls, clean white covers on twin beds, pale blue carpet, white blinds pulled down. On the bedside table, Stephen has left an orange and a packet of biscuits with a note. Hope you had a good sleep. Gone to make some phone calls. Back by 7. For an eternity, she stands in the shower with her arms dangling by her sides, letting the water beat down on her head, her shoulders, her back. Arriving yesterday, Stephen and Zora gorged themselves on a meal of omelettes, fried trout and potatoes in the brightly lit hotel restaurant. Zora noticed the waitress whispering to the proprietor while looking in their direction. Of course, her hair was a mess, her clothes stank, she was severely underweight. She'd wanted to apologize and explain that she'd been too hungry to wash. Belgrade Airport is closed due to sanctions. Budapest is the next closest. The coach purrs through the night. Zora slips in and out of sleep, pulling Mirsad's coat around her and breathing him in. She worries over where he is and what he's doing. She's anxious that her family might not recognize her, that she might catch a glimmer of distaste on their faces when they first see her. They get to Budapest Airport mid-morning. On the plane, Zora fumbles with the seatbelt, tightening it. She wants to cry. She sees Mirsad alone in her flat by the stove, back turned to her. The engines start up with a shudder, and she closes her eyes, gripping the armrests tightly to hold herself down, to stop herself from getting up and off the plane. Heathrow is intense. Everything is so bright and so clean. Automatic doors open onto a great hall heaving with people holding up signs. But there, at the very front of the crowd, are Franjo and Dubravka. "Mama!" Dubravka half screams, and somehow all three of them are embracing, the distance between them squeezed to nothing at last, a single unit of mother, father, and child, and it feels they will never let go. "My Dubravka, my Franjo," Zora says, stroking the sides of their faces, looking into their eyes. And for a second, just then, there is a moment of complete happiness. In the back of her daughter's Peugeot, Franjo puts his arm round her, pulling her close. She leans her head on his chest. She drinks in England through drooping eyes. The voices of her family blend into the hum of the engine. Sooner than Zora expected, they come to the small village of Fovant. The stone church, the red pillar box on the corner, the bare-branched oak tree that knocks against the windows of Stephen and her daughter's home. Her mother and granddaughter are inside, baking baklava. After. She calls her flat repeatedly, only to hear the long single note of the dead line. In the drawn-out moment between her index finger pressing the last digit and the blank tone, hope exists. The war goes on for years. It turns out that she got out at the start. though in Sarajevo the first year was the worst in terms of death and destruction. When her fingers finally heal and her tremor recedes, her obsession with the Goat's Bridge returns. She paints it again and again, never satisfied, never able to move on. She knows she reached a new place with her art that winter in Sarajevo, something original, something truly of her, but she can no longer access it. Una's laughter echoes in her ears as she paints. She never hears from any of them. She imagines the letters she sends, and the letters Mirsad, Samir and Lenke have written, collected together in a dark corner of some forgotten rural post office in deepest Bosnia. Their stories, unread, unknown. Sometimes, just before dawn, she dreams of black butterflies, their charred wings opening and closing as they drift down in their hundreds and thousands, alighting on her cheeks, her eyes, her mouth.